Very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Africa's moves towards improving access to green energy have taken a massive hit with the pandemic. We take a closer look at the difficult balancing act before the continent if it's to navigate the hurdles and ramp up development in the crucial sector. Also, questions are raised about the death of the judge tackling the corruption trial of DR Congo's chief of staff. When Raphael Yanni was found dead last month, police said he'd had a heart attack. Now a murder probe's been launched after the Justice Ministry says he was fatally hit in the head. And in the past, South Africa's Trains of Hope have transported healthcare workers to remote areas. Now they're being used to get help to where it's needed most as the country struggles to stay on track in tackling coronavirus. But first, as the continent races to contain the spread of Covid-19 whilst trying to hold on to development gains, analysts are warning that the pandemic could roll back progress in access to more and greener energy. Electricity is not only crucial to the fight back to the crisis, but also to Africa's prospect of economic recovery. But pre-existing weaknesses in infrastructure are being exacerbated by the coronavirus lockdowns and slowdowns. That means billions across sub-Saharan Africa who don't have clean fuel for cooking and running their households. Nigeria and DR Congo have the world's largest energy shortfall. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Ricardo Puliti, the World Bank's Global Director for Energy and Regional Director for Infrastructure in Africa. Ricardo, thanks very much for speaking to me. First of all, just give us a bit of a sense about how much of an impact Covid-19 has had on the continent's energy prospects.
Georgia, first of all, good evening. Thank you for having me. I have to say the impact of COVID has been pretty substantial. The success by the African countries to have an early lockdown in order to avoid the spreading of the disease, of course, had some undesirable effect. For example, the quick reduction in demand for electricity, and in addition, the fact that there is less income available has made that there is far less capacity to pay the bills. So a combined situation where you have less demand for electricity and more difficulty to receive payments has made the financial situation for the utilities in Africa far more difficult. And we had to say utilities were already financially strained. So it is a pretty stressful situation from a financial and from an access viewpoint.
So you've outlined there just some of the difficulties facing the continent, that things when it comes to energy infrastructure were already difficult. This has just made things worse. With all that in mind and all the pressures the continent's currently facing, can governments still afford to focus specifically on clean energy? And does that cause any kind of conflict with private sector investors already on the continent who were working on electrification?
No, I have to say I don't see any trade-off between going towards a cleaner energy and to have affordable and sustainable energy. There shouldn't be any trade-off in that. Think about the cost for renewables, especially solar, has gone down very, very, very much in the last 20 years. In addition, they are very easy to install. So that's very important. It's very important in order to develop them quicker and further. And then with new technologies such as electrochemical batteries, even the problem of the renewables not being present all the time, it is being solved. And I think that public and private sector working for the electrification of Africa, for the reliability of electricity in Africa, they are perfectly complementary. The important is to have a long-term view that ensures the continent affordable, clean, and sustainable energy.
And so you get the sense that this is a priority for African governments with which the World Bank's working?
No doubt whatsoever. Absolutely no doubt. When I talk to the governments in Africa, and I talk to all of them all the time, I can see pretty easily that there is no intention to go back to old technologies in order to further electrification. The idea is to proceed in parallel, improve the problem of access and reliability, but using green energy as much as possible.
And what kind of clean energy should the continent be focusing on?
The continent is incredibly well endorsed. There are all kinds of energy in Africa from the solar viewpoint. It is one of the most endowed regions in the world. Wind, onshore and offshore wind, hydro. Think about the large rivers in Africa. Geothermal, for example, in Eastern Africa. Gas along the coast. Gas can help in the energy transition, at least at the beginning. So Africa is very well endowed from all possible sources of energy. Where I would put the stress, though, is about regional cooperation. It would be pretty not smart to have every country to have their own little energy system. Energy cooperation will allow for energy security by sharing resources, will allow for reduced costs because capital expenditures will be less. There is no need to build everybody the same plant. And by using all different energy and being connected by interconnectors, will allow to reduce the problem of having energy all the time. So if there is a drought, I can use a little bit more of gas, I can use a little bit more of solar or wind. If, on the other hand, there is a moment where wind is not available, I can go back to hydro. So having this possibility to share all the sources will increase the strength and the reliance of the system in Africa.
Thanks very much. Riccardo Puliti there from the World Bank speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
In other news, Tanzania's released its first coronavirus figures since the government stopped doing so on April the 29th. The Prime Minister said that the country has 66 hospitalised cases. The government's been downplaying the threat of the illness. President John Magufuli's declared Tanzania coronavirus-free, crediting the power of prayer. Opposition figures, though, have accused the government of covering up the true number of cases in the country. A murder investigation started into the death of a top judge in the embezzlement trial of the DR Congolese presidential chief of staff. Raphael Yanyi died last month, apparently from head trauma. Police at the time had claimed that the cause of death was a heart attack. Clément Bonero joins us now with more. Clément, why the sudden change in cause of death? Tell us more about what you know, what's known at this point.
Well, the information we have comes from a statement that was released earlier this evening by Celestin Tundaya-Kasende. He's the Justice Minister here in DR Congo. In his statement, he details the results of an autopsy that was carried out on the body of Raphael Yanyi, who, as you said, was found dead under very suspicious circumstances on the 26th of May. Police had reported a heart attack at first, but several days later, media outlets across the country questioned that theory, saying that he had perhaps been poisoned. Well, the statement released by the Justice Minister discards both theories. It confirms that the cause of death was not natural. It also confirms that traces of toxic substances were indeed found in the judge's body. But what seems to have caused the judge's death was, as you said, internal bleeding caused by a traumatic injury to the head, traumatic injury to the skull. Now, I was able to speak to the Justice Minister a few hours ago, and he said that the autopsy seems to point towards a violent death. So we're not talking about a domestic accident here. We're not talking about someone injuring himself, falling down the stairs. We're talking about someone who most probably received heavy blows to the neck, heavy blows to the head, which caused internal bleeding and ultimately which caused death. In any case, an investigation has now been opened for murder. The Justice Minister, in his statement, denounces what he describes as an ignominious act.
Thanks very much. Clément Bonero there for us in DR Congo. Well, South Africa's seen a huge spike in the number of recorded coronavirus cases. It's the continent's worst hit country. And in a bid to keep on track in dealing with the crisis, it's repurposed a special railway line to get help to where it's needed most. Nicolas Chemin has more.
These trains, known as Pelo Pepper, have been providing healthcare to rural areas of South Africa for years. But with the coronavirus pandemic, their mission has changed. Workers are now carrying out Covid-19 tests inside the trains. South Africa accounts for a quarter of the cases on the continent. But these statistics could be misleading because South Africa has also carried out more than 1 million tests, far more than many other African countries.
Kubalulekile into yobana uzazi i-status sakho so that ubana ngabana u-positive ukwazi u-quarantine uhlale endlini unyange i-corona ube safe.
I now suddenly realize that corona is real and I think I should know my status, know if I'm safe or not. And my worry is that my aunt is a nurse, so she goes to work every day, then comes back, stay with us.
The problem for South Africa is that cases are surging 3 weeks after it eased one of the most stringent lockdowns on Earth. Africa accounts for only about 3% of the world's confirmed coronavirus cases. But the World Health Organization is worried. The pandemic is now accelerating swiftly. It took 3 months for Africa to reach 100,000 confirmed cases, and less than 3 weeks to get to 200,000 cases.
And finally, unusual times have paved the way to the new normal. Creatives have been digging deep in coming up with ways to share their vision to a world in lockdown. One Congolese designer has been sharing hers on a virtual catwalk. Take a look.
It's a new kind of fashion show, a 3D animated event. This collection by Congolese designer Anifa Mvwemba should have been presented at the New York Fashion Week. But the event was cancelled because of the coronavirus. That's when she had the idea of a virtual fashion show.
The entire world is home, on their phones. This is like the best time to do this. Like, this is the best time. So we're like, I gather my team. I'm like, look, guys, this is our timeline. I know it's really short, but we have to get this done.
The body of an avatar had to be used so the viewer would have the feeling of being at a fashion show.
It was hard because we had to make sure that it matched the like realistic garment. Like, we had a really hard time making sure like a dress flowed like naturally and how it would flow if a curvy woman was wearing it.
This virtual fashion show by the Congolese designer is on her Instagram page and has already been seen by more than 100,000 fans.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.